The kitchen smelled like onions and something slow, something that had been on the stove since noon. She is in every photograph from 1955. Shirtwaist dress, hair set for the day, kitchen already warm by 9:00 in the morning. Any town, any street, any American home. She didn't count a calorie. She didn't scan a barcode. She didn't own a food journal or a subscription to anything. She had a pot roast from the A&P, 6 carrots, and an hour before her husband came home. That was the plan. Most of what she ate has either disappeared or been replaced with something that looks the same and does the opposite. Number 1 is not a diet food. She never called it that, and it cost nothing. What she ate, what it actually did, and what was quietly put in its place. This is the kind of video this channel exists to make. Let's go. Number 15. Borden's full-fat milk. In 1955, the Borden's truck came down her street before 6:00 in the morning. She heard the glass bottles on the porch before she heard anything else. Borden's. Seal test. Hoods if she lived in New England. Full fat. Cream on top. Delivered cold while the kitchen was still dark. She poured it on everything. Oatmeal, coffee, the kids' cereal. She did not read the fat content on the label because it did not occur to her to read the fat content. The fat was the point. Full-fat milk creates a satiety signal, a message to the brain that the body has received something substantial. That message held her at the table until dinner. In 1977, the dietary guidelines told her fat was the problem. She switched to skinny. What she did not know was that low-fat milk, to be palatable, requires added sugar. She traded the satiety signal for sweetness. The milk stayed in the refrigerator, but it was not the same product. The cream on top disappeared. She kept drinking what looked like milk and wondered why she was hungrier than she used to be. Number 14. Real cream in coffee. This is what she put in her coffee before the powdered creamer existed. Coffee Mate launched in 1961. Before that, she had cream. Hoods, seal test, a small pitcher on the table, poured from the same bottle the milkman left. Real fat, real satiation, something her body recognized as food. She had 2 cups in the morning, and that was breakfast, or breakfast started after that. The fat in the cream slowed the glucose spike from whatever she ate alongside it. Her blood sugar stayed even. She didn't crash at 10:00 and reach for something to fix it. Coffee Mate was a Nestle product made from corn syrup solids and partially hydrogenated vegetable oil. It was cheaper than cream, it didn't spoil, and it was marketed as modern and convenient. She bought it because it was easier. What she lost was the fat. What arrived instead was corn syrup solids and trans fats, 2 things that would take decades for nutrition science to fully reckon with. 2 cups of coffee with real cream. That was how her morning began. It held her longer than anyone gave her credit for. Number 13. Slow-cooked oatmeal. This is what she made for breakfast before anyone sold her the box. The pot made a low sound, not a boil, a slow bubble, and the kitchen filled with something plain and warm. Steam rose off the stove, the smell of oats and hot milk. She made oatmeal the way her mother made oatmeal. 20 minutes on the stove, 1 cup of water, a pinch of salt, a splash of whole milk poured over the top. Quaker Oats had been in her kitchen since before she was born. The round cardboard canister with the Quaker man on the front was the same one her mother kept on the same shelf. She did not eat oatmeal because someone told her it was healthy. She ate it because it was cheap, it was filling, and it lasted until noon without question. Whole rolled or steel-cut oats have a low glycemic load. The fiber slows digestion. The satiety lasts 3 to 4 hours. She did not snack between breakfast and lunch because her body was not requesting anything. In the 1960s, Quaker launched instant oatmeal packets. By the 1970s, they came pre-sweetened, maple and brown sugar, apple cinnamon, strawberry and cream. Each packet contained nearly as much added sugar as a candy bar. The oats were still there, the fiber was still there, but the sweetener pushed the glycemic load to where the whole foods advantage was mostly undone. She ate oatmeal. What replaced it ate like dessert. Number 12. Sunday pot roast and bone broth. This is what she did with Sunday's leftovers that nobody does anymore. Sunday was pot roast. A 3-pound chuck roast from the A&P or the corner butcher, browned in a Dutch oven. put in with carrots and celery and onion and whatever the garden had. 4 hours on low heat. The fat rendered into the vegetables. The collagen in the connective tissue dissolved into the liquid underneath. She served the roast on Sunday. She served the leftovers cold on Monday with mustard. She put the bones in a pot of water Tuesday morning, added an onion and a bay leaf, and simmered it for 6 hours. That liquid was dinner Tuesday night, the base for Wednesday's soup, and gone by Thursday. What she was making on Tuesday was bone broth. She didn't call it that. She called it stock. Or she didn't call it anything because it was just what you did with the bones. Stay with this one for a second because the math is important. Collagen and satiety from long-simmered bones support the gut lining, slow digestion, and create a fullness that lasts for hours. That same liquid is now sold at Whole Foods for $6 a carton labeled as a wellness product. The bones cost nothing. She made it from what she would have otherwise thrown away. The circular kitchen didn't exist because she was virtuous. It existed because the bones were there, and the stove was on, and wasting food felt like a sin. Number 11. Full-fat cottage cheese. This was what the magazines called the perfect diet food, and they were accidentally right. Number 11 was full-fat cottage cheese, a 1950s diet staple. In 1952, Marilyn Monroe told Photoplay magazine what she ate for lunch. Cottage cheese, a piece of fruit. That was it. 40 million Americans read Photoplay. By the end of that decade, cottage cheese was the most photographed diet food in America. Not because a nutritionist prescribed it, but because the most photographed woman in the world was eating it at her kitchen table. Breakstones. Seal test. Sometimes the store brand in the waxed cardboard tub. She put it on a plate with half a canned peach from a Del Monte tin and called it lunch. Ladies' Home Journal and Good Housekeeping ran cottage cheese recipes in nearly every issue. It was inexpensive, available everywhere. And it worked because full-fat cottage cheese is almost entirely protein and fat with almost no sugar. Protein at lunch meant she wasn't hungry at 2. 0. She didn't keep a snack drawer because she didn't need one. Cottage cheese, a peach, a glass of seal test milk. Done until dinner. At some point, cottage cheese went low-fat. Low-fat dairy products require flavor to replace what the fat provided, and the flavor that got added was sugar. Low-fat cottage cheese has more carbohydrates than the original product. The satiety that made it work was in the fat that was removed. She still bought cottage cheese. The container looked the same. What was inside was not the same thing. Number 10. Real fermented bread. This is what the bread was before. The bread became something else. On Friday mornings, you could smell the bakery from the street. Every neighborhood had one. The loaves came out before 8. 0. Heavy, dark crusted, wrapped in paper. She carried it home still warm. And it tore differently from Wonder Bread. It had weight to it and a chew that meant something. Her kitchen smelled like it for an hour after she set it on the counter. Wonder Bread was already on the shelves, but she was still making bread at home on Fridays or buying from that corner bakery. And that bread was different from Wonder Bread in a way the label did not explain. Real bread. Bread made with a longer fermentation. A sourdough culture. The process her grandmother used has a lower glycemic index than industrially produced white bread. The fermentation breaks down some of the starches before they ever reach her stomach. Wonder Bread was enriched. The enrichment was necessary because the industrial milling process had stripped out most of the nutrients in the original wheat. The vitamins were removed and then added back in synthetic form. The bread was softer, lasted longer on the shelf, and tasted exactly like what it was. Something engineered for convenience rather than nutrition. She ate bread at every meal. She was not overweight. The bread she was eating in 1952 was not the same category of product as the sliced white bread filling American shopping carts by 1970. Number 9. Sardines and oily fish. This is the fish she ate every week that Americans quietly stopped eating. Friday was fish. In Catholic households across America, it was non-negotiable. But outside of Catholic households, it was nearly as common. Sardines in olive oil. King Oscar on the label. Eaten on Ritz crackers at lunch. Canned tuna from Bumblebee, Starkist, or Chicken of the Sea, mixed with a little Hellmann's mayonnaise and celery, served on white bread. She did not think of this as a health decision. It was lunch. It cost 35 cents. Sardines and small oily fish are among the most nutritionally complete foods that exist. Omega-3s, vitamin D, calcium from the soft bones, B12, complete protein. Omega-3s reduce inflammation and support the metabolic processes that regulate weight and appetite. She ate them every Friday without thinking. Somewhere between 1960 and 1985, Americans stopped eating sardines. The cultural association with poverty, with immigrant households, with something old-fashioned was enough to kill the habit in a single generation. The omega-3s are still there, in the same King Oscar tin, on the bottom shelf of every grocery store. Nobody reaches for them anymore. Number 8. Home-fermented pickles and sauerkraut. This is what she kept in the basement that was alive. In the cellar, there were ball mason jars, cucumbers from the garden, packed in salt water and dill, cabbage shredded and salted and pressed down into a crock and left to ferment for 3 weeks. Her mother had done it. Her grandmother had done it. In the 1950s, she still did it, though by the end of the decade, the Vlasic jar was starting to appear on the A&P shelf. The difference between her pickles and the Vlasic jar was simple. Hers were alive. The fermentation created lactobacillus bacteria, the same beneficial organisms now sold in probiotic supplement capsules for $30 a bottle. They colonized the gut. They supported digestion and appetite regulation. They produced compounds that helped the body recognize when it had eaten enough. The Vlasic jar was preserved with vinegar and heat, which killed everything living in it. The pickles looked identical. The product inside was not the same. The ball mason jars moved to the attic. The Vlasic jars went into the refrigerator door. Something that had been doing quiet work in her gut for generations went with them. Number 7. Half a grapefruit before breakfast. This is the fruit she ate before every meal that doctors actually prescribed. Here is what none of these 15 items had in common with what replaced them. Not one of them came in a package designed by a marketing team. Not one of them had a television commercial telling her to buy it. Not one of them was formulated in a laboratory to hit the precise intersection of salt, fat, and sugar at which the brain's stop signal fails to arrive. She didn't eat Quaker Oats because a celebrity told her they were healthy. She ate them because her mother ate them. And they cost 12 cents, and she wasn't hungry until noon. The foods that replaced what is on this list were not developed because she needed better options. They were developed because they could be manufactured cheaply, packaged with a long shelf life, and sold at margins that actual food could not support. She lost 15 foods. She didn't notice losing them one at a time. One of you wrote under the diet video that my mother ate half a grapefruit every single morning of her life. She never explained why. She just did it. Every woman in America knew. The grapefruit diet, sometimes called the Hollywood diet, had been circulating since the 1930s. By the 1950s, it was not a fad anymore. It was just breakfast. Half a grapefruit, a soft-boiled egg, black coffee. Doctors recommended it. Good Housekeeping printed versions of it. Ladies' Home Journal ran the grapefruit plate in nearly every issue that touched weight management. Here is why it worked. Grapefruit is high in water and fiber, and it takes real effort to eat. A half grapefruit before a meal occupies space in the stomach before the main food arrives. It slows the pace of the meal. It pulls forward satiety. She naturally ate less at breakfast, not because she was disciplined, but because there was less room. What replaced it? The grapefruit disappeared from the American breakfast table sometime in the 1970s and the 1980s. It was replaced by orange juice, which has roughly the same calories as a can of Coke, with none of the fiber, and it is consumed in 30 seconds rather than 10 minutes. The satiety mechanism was gone. The sugar remained. Half a grapefruit and a spoon. That was breakfast. She did not call it a diet. Number 6. Pastured eggs. This is the egg. Before the egg became a health crisis. In the early 1950s, millions of American households still kept backyard chickens. She might have had 4 or 5 hens. Eggs gathered in the morning, cracked into the cast-iron pan before noon. Or she bought them from a neighbor, from the corner dairy, from the farm stand at the end of the road. The yolk of that egg was deep yellow, almost orange, Because a hen that eats grass, insects, and kitchen scraps produces an egg with dramatically more vitamin D, omega-3 fatty acids, and beta-carotene than a hen that spends her life on a concrete floor eating corn. A pastured raised egg has roughly twice the omega-3 fatty acids and 3 times the vitamin E of a commercial factory egg. The yolk color tells you the difference at a glance. In the 1960s, the egg was blamed for cholesterol, the yolk specifically. Women began buying egg beaters. They scrambled egg whites and called it health food. The part they threw away contained almost all of the nutrition. And by then, most eggs came from hens that never saw sunlight. So the yolk was pale anyway. And the difference was already gone. She cracked the egg, and the yolk was the color of a marigold. Nobody said that mattered. They just had not figured out yet that it did. Number 5. The gelatin salad. This is the strangest looking food on this list. In 1955, it was served at dinner parties. Open any 1950s cookbook. The Betty Crocker Picture Cookbook from 1950. The Joy of Cooking from 1953. A church lady's potluck booklet from anywhere in Ohio, Virginia, or Kansas. And within the first 50 pages, you will find a gelatin salad. Lime jello with cucumber and cream cheese, tomato aspic with celery, and olives suspended inside. Knox gelatin, molded with shredded carrots and raisins, set in a ring mold, served on a bed of iceberg lettuce at the center of the dinner table. She made them for company. She made them on Tuesday nights when there was nothing else. She set them in the refrigerator overnight and served them as the first course or alongside the main dish or instead of dessert. Here is what the gelatin salad was doing. Gelatin, real Knox unflavored gelatin, not sweetened jello, is primarily collagen protein. A serving before or alongside a meal slows gastric emptying, reduces appetite, and adds protein with almost no calories. The vegetables suspended inside added fiber. The whole thing required 15 minutes of preparation and cost almost nothing. It occupied space at the table that today is occupied by bread, chips, or nothing at all before the main course arrives. The gelatin salad disappeared from American kitchens in the 1970s, mostly as a joke. Food writers made fun of it. It became shorthand for bad taste, for suburban housewife cuisine, for the kind of food that civilized people had moved beyond. What replaced it at the dinner table? Nothing. The appetizer course disappeared. The meal started with the main dish, and the main dish was bigger than it had ever been because there was nothing to eat beforehand. The jello mold sitting in her refrigerator was laughed out of American kitchens. Something that had been occupying the stomach before dinner had done so since before anyone in the room was born. Number 4. Chicken and beef liver. This is the meat nobody wanted anymore, that turned out to be the most nutritious thing on the animal. Tuesday night was liver night. Chicken livers in a cast iron pan with onions. Beef liver with bacon at the diner counter. The Betty Crocker's Good and Easy cookbook, published in 1954, included multiple liver recipes because of course it did. Every home cook of that era knew what to do with liver. It was inexpensive. It was at every butcher counter. And it went on the table once a week without discussion. Liver is the single most nutrient-dense food that exists. A 4-ounce serving of beef liver contains more vitamin A than any other food, more vitamin B12 than almost anything, along with significant iron, folate, riboflavin, zinc, and CoQ10. The women eating liver every week were receiving a nutritional density that a modern daily multivitamin barely begins to approximate. Liver fell out of fashion in the 1960s and the 1970s, partly because of texture, partly because the generation that grew up eating it during the Depression was tired of it and stopped cooking it for their children, and partly because prosperity meant you did not have to eat the cheap cut anymore. Liver consumption fell dramatically between 1950 and 1980. Those same nutrients are now sold in supplement capsules, $35 a bottle. Freeze-dried organ meat in a gel cap, marketed as a biohacking discovery. She paid 40 cents a pound. She made it with onions. She did not need the capsule. Number 3. Eggs and toast for breakfast. This is the morning meal that disappeared from American kitchens one cereal box at a time. In 1950, the most common American breakfast was eggs. 2 eggs, scrambled or fried, with toast and black coffee. Sometimes a strip of bacon alongside. Kellogg's and Post have been selling cereal since the 1890s, but it was not yet the default. She cooked breakfast on the stove. It took 8 minutes. The protein and fat from 2 eggs held her until lunchtime. She did not have a mid-morning hunger that required fixing. She did not think about food again until noon. Kellogg spent heavily in the 1950s and 1960s marketing breakfast cereal as the modern, healthy, efficient breakfast. Sugar Frosted Flakes launched in 1952. Cocoa Krispies launched in 1958. By the mid-1960s, the cereal aisle had expanded to fill an entire wall of every American supermarket. A bowl of Sugar Frosted Flakes had 11 grams of sugar. The blood sugar spike arrived by 8. 30. The crash arrived by 9. 30. She was hungry again before 10. 00. In the kitchen, at the office, wherever she happened to be, and there was always something nearby to reach for. The eggs were still in the refrigerator. Breakfast had moved to the cereal box. Everything that followed moved with it. Number 2. Plain full-fat yogurt. This is what she ate that was sold as a health food, and then quietly had everything that made it work removed. Number 2. Dannon plain yogurt before the fruit on the bottom. Dannon came to America in 1942. Isaac Carasso, who had started Danone in 1919, brought the company to New York during the war. For years, Dannon sold one product, full-fat plain, slightly tart yogurt in a small glass jar. No fruit on the bottom, no sweetener, no flavoring. It sat in the dairy case next to the Sealtest cottage cheese, and it was bought by immigrants who recognized it and housewives who had read about it in Good Housekeeping. Full-fat plain yogurt is a complete protein with live cultures, fat for satiety, and almost no sugar. It was functionally identical to what women in Greece, Turkey, and Eastern Europe had been eating for 1,000 years. In 1947, Dannon added strawberry preserves to the bottom. Sales tripled overnight. By 1977, Yoplait arrived in the United States. It was sweetened with fruit on the bottom and marketed directly at women watching their figures. Each small container had more added sugar than 3 Oreo cookies, and the label said light and healthy, and just 90 calories because the serving size had been made small enough to make the math work. She bought it because the label said what she needed to hear. The label said what they paid for the label to say. Number 1. The closed kitchen. What she didn't eat. The most important food she had in 1955 is not on this list because she didn't eat it. Between dinner and breakfast, 10, 11, sometimes 12 hours, she didn't eat. Between breakfast and lunch, she didn't eat. Not because she was disciplined, not because she had a protocol, because there was nothing in the kitchen engineered to pull her back into it. The Quaker canister was for tomorrow's breakfast. The Sealtest cottage cheese was for lunch. The Ball Mason jars were for winter. The pot roast was for Monday. The 14 foods on this list worked partly because of what they contained. The fat, the protein, the bacteria, the collagen, the omega-3s, and they worked partly because they were consumed at the table, at mealtimes, in portions that a real kitchen produced, not in single-serving packages designed to disappear without counting, not in front of 3 hours of television with a bag of something that tasted like it was engineered to keep you reaching in. When the packages arrived, the kitchen stopped closing. When the kitchen stopped closing, the 14 foods on this list were no longer doing the job on their own. The infrastructure that made them work, the meal times, the table, the closed pantry, the boring evening, had been replaced, item by item, with something that needed her to keep buying. She didn't have willpower. She had a kitchen that closed. There's a photograph somewhere. She's at the kitchen table. A Borden's milk bottle on the counter behind her. A Ball Mason jar on the shelf. A cast iron pan on the stove. She is not thinking about what she ate. She is not thinking about what she weighs. She is thinking about whether to use the chicken bones tonight or save them for tomorrow. She didn't call it a diet. If these forgotten traditions changed how you look at the food in your own pantry, please subscribe and like this video. We are uncovering the history they tried to bury. Let's plant the seeds for a healthier future together. The next treasure trove of knowledge will open soon.